Basically, it's the turn of this century. And it's kind of midnight, and two babies are being born in the same hospital, in the same ward, to two very different couples. To Hope and Isaac in one room, and to Anna and Julius in another room. And the babies are born within minutes of each other. And when the mothers leave the hospital the next day, one leaves with a baby and one doesn't. And one of the mothers takes the other one's baby. And I never know quite how much to say without being a spoiler, but it's about a stolen child, basically, and it's about identity.
And it kicks off, really, at first. You're sort of lulled into a false sense of security. You think, oh, awful vain politician, really nice couple, care workers, good on them. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself in this incredibly dark place. In the first 70 pages, we've got a dead baby, a kidnapped baby, a bit of drug and alcohol abuse thrown in. At what point did you think, this is the novel I want to write? I'm going to really pull my readers to a place that's going to be quite shocking for them.
Well, what I really wanted to write about was identity. That's what I wanted to explore, because it's been a little bit in my life, and it's been in the life of my own mother. And I'm interested in who makes us and where we're from, and whether we're from our genetic background, whether we're from who raises us or who steps up for us, whether blood is what matters or not. And I wanted to have a kind of moral dilemma at the center of this novel, so that your leanings, your sympathy might be with somebody who really you shouldn't be sympathizing with. Somebody commits a massive, terrible crime, a sin, and takes somebody else's baby. This is not somebody we should be praising or being, empathizing with in any way. And yet I just wanted to question whether in the long run, has that baby been raised by the right family? Ultimately, should anyone ever have a say in what baby they raise, when and how, and who that baby belongs to? And what happens when you're 18 and you find out that this mother that you always believed was your mother in such a strong, powerful, visceral way is not your mother? And who is your mother, and who do you belong to? So in a way, those first 70 pages have to be fairly dark so that we can kind of creep into the light a little bit.
And you manage to make, as you say, your character, your mother, your kidnapper, an incredibly sympathetic one, I think, and one does really empathize with her, which I think must have been quite a challenge. But what you can't help but notice is all the many strands, which you sort of alluded to at the beginning of that answer, to your own life. I'm not sure about your mother's search for identity, but, obviously you and Lenny Henry, your first husband, adopted a child, and so you've asked all those questions of yourself, and I wondered what sort of answers you've come up with.
Well, I think the whole point is I don't have any answers. All I have is the
questions.
Yeah, I have questions, and I have a very strong tide of love that I was swept up in instantly, which I do not question at all. And so that very strong mother line goes between me and my daughter, and it is unquestionable. And it's been challenged on many, many occasions, like any mother and daughter, any mother and son probably. But raising my daughter has been the biggest challenge for me, huge, frightening, the most difficult and yet the most satisfying and sure relationship I think I've ever had in my life. And so I can't imagine it being broken in any way. And I can't imagine that this girl who I adopted or we adopted is not my daughter in every way. Yet there is someone else, there is someone else involved who I have so much time for, and yet I don't know, so it's about including all the others, all the affected others, if you like.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of children, adopted children, go on to want to meet their blood parents. That's the only expression I can think of to describe it. Sorry, I'm sure there's a more technical term. But I would have thought that you, like as an adopting parent, it must be quite compelling for you as well to want to meet that parent that's created this child in unison with you.
I might want that, and I might have had moments when I do or have done. However, my respect for that person's life and the choices they made overrides my desires for anything. I mean, in the pyramid of adoption, if you like, which is the birth mother, the child, and me, I am at the bottom of this pyramid. The child is at the top, the blood or birth parent is somewhere there in the middle, and then the adopting parents are at the bottom. And really the choice is my daughter's choice, and she chooses not to do that just yet. When she does, I'll be right there for her.
In your 2017 book, Me, You, a Diary, you passed on what wisdom you could, and it seems that you've given, in a way, some of that wisdom to Hope in this book. And I wondered if Hope's mothering, comes from your sort of greatest hits as a mother, or more like how you would have liked to have handled things.
Yes, I guess it's a wish list as much as anything. I mean, I had a pretty fantastic mother myself, thank God. I mean, with all her flaws, and we fell out plenty of times. We had our wars, but we were very, very close. And I have witnessed other friends of mine be brilliant mothers. Jennifer, to quote one, but so many of my friends have been fantastic mothers. And I've got a fantastic mother-in-law, and I had a fantastic mother-in-law, and I've just got loads of time for good mums. I've got loads of time actually for good parents. I'm a big fan. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a massive fan of good dads. Because I had a good one who I lost very early. So whenever I see somebody being a good dad, that is a big turn on for me.
You said that the loss of your father committed suicide when you were really young, that had an absolutely pivotal impact on your life. In what way?
Well, I guess, we were a square, our family, a mum, a dad, a son, a daughter, and we became a triangle. And that's a very odd change when you're 18, which I was, just turning 19. And, I didn't get to know my dad as an adult to adult. So I still lionized my dad as a huge positive influence in my life. But then at that age, I'm confronted with the anger of what he chose to do and not understanding it for a long time. And then, in my life now, go through the process of accepting it and understanding mental illness and the giant effects of it, and the forgiveness for somebody taking those huge, seismic decisions to remove themselves from you, and why somebody would do that in what I thought was a very happy family. But I didn't understand mental ill health when I was that young, but I do now. And I think part of this, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but you have to learn some lessons. And I've learned about how people's sadnesses can affect them so badly, and how talking matters. My dad didn't have access to the old talking medicine. I wish he had.
It's so interesting you say that. My dad died when I was 15. He was an alcoholic, so he sort of died of that, really. But I think I went through exactly the same process in terms of, sort of lionizing him at the beginning, sort of elevating him to an impossible position in life as virtually perfect. And then slowly, as I grew up and grew older and matured, having to come to terms with him as a real human being, a sort of flawed human being, and that sort of process really changes, I think, as well, how you are in your own relationships with people who are still living as well. Do you agree?
Mm. Yes, I do agree. And I think it intensifies things a bit. I think when you've lost a parent early, you have a little bit of anxiety about losing the other parent, or even losing yourself as a parent. Young, I certainly went through that. But I definitely focused much more on my brother and my mum than I think I would have done if we hadn't lost my dad. And I've always got my sniffer out for anybody that I think might be in trouble. And I'm known to clod hop in with my big concrete boots if I think somebody's more than sad. And I will always say, are you okay? And you can tell me to F off any moment you want to, but I'm just saying, are you okay? Because I'm not going to miss those signs ever again in my life.
What about when you're sad? Because you talked in your memoir, Dear Fatty, which came out in 2008, about sort of inventing yourself as this resilient, happy person, finding yourself in New York and thinking, this is the person I'm going to have to pretend to be. And I wonder how long that lasts before you realize that actually you need the same sort of support from outside that other people do, and that sometimes keeping up the happy face isn't necessarily the best way forward.
Well, yeah, that's true. Although I would say that kind of fake it to make it emotional game that you play with yourself does kind of work, because it gives you a little bit of time off for your real courage to catch up, or your real happiness that might be in abeyance or sleeping, or you've put it away. You give it time to catch up, but you are faking it for a while. And I suspect everyone knows that, because we all read each other, don't we, in interesting, sophisticated ways. But I'm a big fan of that. And meanwhile, you allow yourself to heal a little bit in private, in your own private, deep places. But you're right that I remember my mum said to me one day, she said, you, like me, are a strong woman, and who looks after the strong women? So you have to make sure that you search for good friends and good partners that understand that you will need support every now and again, but you need to ask for it. You need to learn how and when to ask for it. And I'm quite happy sailing along under my own steam until I really do need to ask. And even now, there are only probably 4 people, I think, in my life that I would reach out to. I regard my role with everyone else as the facilitator and the fixer. And I might be completely misguided about that, but that's what makes me happier. But there are a couple of people who know where the holes are in my personal colander.
You've been remarkably resilient. You've lived through some really traumatic things. We talked about the death of your father. And one of the things I was really shocked by, and I didn't realize, even though I sort of grew up with you in terms of your presence in my life, on television, and then later, we've met in the past, but was the incredible level of racism that you and Lenny experienced together, and bringing up your daughter, Billy. How did you manage to cope with that at the time? Because I think very few people would have understood what you were going through.
I cope with it because the fuel I got was from being absolutely furious. And because it was so unjust and wrong. And I suppose I had never experienced anything like that until I met him. And I just couldn't believe, the continual racism that happened in his life, the casual, insidious racism, which I found really offensive. But then the big giant, let's, smear shit on your door and try to set fire to your house kind of racism. But I was so angry about it that that's what kind of got us through it. We took action whenever we could, and we garnered support whenever we could. We reported it to the police. For a while we had the police living inside our home when some people had scratched really racist slogans on every panel of 2 cars outside our house. So the police had cameras set up looking outwards, and they lived in our house for a couple of weeks just to see if we could catch the people. So it very, very bad. And and now I have a mixed race daughter, and I see what she experiences. I see it, but she's very strong, and actually she can sniff a racist at 200 yards. It takes a nice steep swerve to the left.
There is that thing about resilience, isn't there? That I mean, God knows no one should have to go through what you've just described. But you talk about your daughter's strength, and it's something we don't hear enough about in terms of young people. Is that they do also, along with their capacity to be insulted and furious, is their ability to withstand a lot of things.
Yeah, I think with guidance and good example, you know, and when if you're held correctly in your upbringing, you know you're strong enough um, to deal with anything that comes your way. Because if you have that, you know, if your scaffolding is made of what is right and just, you know, you're built correctly, if you like, in that. And weirdly, one of the reasons I wanted to write this main character in this book, Minnie, I've written her from naught till age 18. And that's kind of why I wanted to see her grow. And I wanted my readers to witness her strength as she grows, even though she also has wobbles, and she's got a giant tsunami of a huge challenge about her actual identity, you know, coming right towards her, and she's going to get through even that because she's fueled by remarkable women, by two mothers, as it happens.
It's interesting to me that, you know, for someone who's renowned as a pioneering and rather brilliant comedian, your novels are actually quite dark. I wondered if you feel that that's kind of comedy's role in a way, is to make palatable all of the unsayable things.
I guess so. I mean, I was aware when I started to write that people will expect I don't know, what would they expect? They might express something frothy from me and light. And to some degree, I want to make sure that I deliver that. But I wanted to find more interesting ways to do that. And the way that I have found is to latch onto a story that I have a lot of faith in. And I am quite a serious person as much as I am also a funny person. And when I'm writing and on my own and just visiting my own imagination, that's the part of me that is more exciting to investigate, is the more serious part. But I would never be able to write a book that is only serious, because I don't live my life like that. And what I'm always looking for is, where is the levity in this character? Where can I write a character that will just make me laugh all day? And I managed to write a character in this, and I wondered whether I would get away with it or not, who's a, you know, a police chief, but
Oh,
who's
so funny.
well, oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad, because you know it's broad strokes. So I didn't know if I would achieve that. You know, when someone is right at the forefront of leading an investigation into something so serious and so dire, and someone who has malapropisms and just gets words wrong all the time and puts his foot in it, but is a bit of a hero in the long run. You know, I enjoyed writing that character a lot, and for me, that's the kind of comedy part of me bubbling up and out into the novel.
I was so interested to discover that at the beginning of your career, somehow this had bypassed me, that you and Jennifer Saunders started out with a double act called the Menopause Sisters. You know, and it feels like, you know, that must have been, what, 30 years ago or something. And it feels like
More.
only now, only now menopause is sort of crawling out of the sort of crepuscular shadows to become a word that we're okay about saying, and we're okay about talking about, and we're okay about dealing with. So it's just another example, really, of how you two were incredibly pioneering, which I know is not a compliment that you take very comfortably, but I think is true.
Well, I will always believe that we, you know, we were very lucky to meet each other for a start, to make each other laugh so much, and to be around when that kind of alternative comedy movement was happening. We weren't aware it was happening. We were just suddenly in it. People said, well, you know, you guys are, you're the antidote to the sexism and the homophobic kind of comedy. And I was thinking, well, why would we be doing that? It wouldn't even occur to us.
But you must have felt the absence of other women doing what you were doing.
Well, that was to our advantage, of course. The comic strip lads at the time, other than I think Pauline Melville, who was a fantastic sort of punk poet, and also played wonderful characters, Maggie Steed a bit. These women were kind of popping up on that alternative scene, but there weren't very many stand-ups or sketch artists, and there was hardly, I don't think there was another duo actually at the time of women. So when we went for the audition, little did we know that really by by dint of having tits, we got the job. Literally, anybody who was female who had walked in that door would have that job, because at that precise moment, the comic strip team was so male and it was so un-PC that it was. They were so desperately looking for women to come in the door, and we walked in the door at that very moment. So we weren't very good, actually, but we did get the chance to improve on the job.
And interestingly now, you know, you are in many ways you represent sort of subversive comedy, pioneering comedy. You've been very brave in your personal life as well as in your working life, and yet when it comes to your sort of acting career, that's made you into a wholly different sort of character, a kind of national institution in terms of the Vicar of Dibley and a sort of bastion of Middle England. Do you feel that you are conflicted in your outward persona?
I don't feel conflicted at all. I mean, I've literally taken advantage of every opportunity that's come my way and said yes to pretty much any adventure where I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting, or this is something I haven't tried before. Vicar of Dibley, which now seems so mainstream on reflection, was a risk at the beginning. It was a risk. We didn't know whether anybody would take it. And, Vicar of Dibley has been quite political in an interesting way. It presents as a lovely, rural, safe, family friendly, tied up with a lovely green bow, very white, very, cozy comedy. And yet I think things were said in that series that I would never have got away with in much edgier platforms of comic strip stuff or whatever. Conversations about bestiality, conversations about trans men and women, conversations about sex, and trying to kind of confound people's ideas of who can minister to you, and how, as a woman, were sort of groundbreaking and were quite edgy. But because it had the lovely bow around it, sort of slipped under the radar.
You've said that you've got more comfortable in your own skin as you've got older. Do you feel a sense of responsibility as a woman in public to be a role model? Do you see yourself as a feminist? Has having a daughter changed your perspective on the world at all?
I don't see myself as in a responsible role, really. And I think if I did, it would stunt me from thinking anything. I think I would feel too responsible, if you like. And I don't see myself as a role model at all. I know that as a human being, I'm fairly responsible, although I might make mistakes. And, we're living in a very strange time now where mistakes are so utterly unforgiven. And I want to buck against that a little bit. And I'm still conflicted about how to live like that. Here I am writing a novel which is very diverse. And an interesting moment came when I had to read the novel. So I had to make the audio book of it. And at that moment, I had to be all the voices of all the many different characters from different cultures that I've written in this novel, and to write people that are mixed race, or an African man, a Nigerian man, a mixed race woman from Bristol, an Indonesian person, whoever it might be in any of my novels. I don't think twice about that. I reserve the right as a writer to explore my imagination in any which way. However, when it comes to the audiobook, I had to think about that. I thought, this is going to be really wrong. It's not that I care so much what other people think, but I don't like what I sound like, trying to sound like an African man. I'm not very good at it to start with. If I was better at doing accents or voices, it might be more palatable, but I'm not sure it is as palatable anymore. So these are the sort of learning moments, the tipping points where you think, I need to investigate what's okay with me to do this. However, I don't want to be rushed into everybody's frantic kind of cancel culture about it either. I want to know what I think about it, and in that way I do feel like a responsible person because I give it some thought.
Do you think that it's imaginatively restrictive cancel culture?
100% yes. Yes. I don't really know how we go forward from this strange position we're in certainly in the world of stand-up comedy, where the edges are where it's the most interesting, where somebody, where Frankie Boyle was somebody where you think, ooh, that's a bit, I don't know if I like that, but it helps you to create your own edges, and I want those edgy people there, challenging us all the time and making us laugh. The kind of laughs you have when you think that's one of the naughtiest things I've ever heard, or there's a person inventing a character who is everything awful, but now I just don't know if you'd ever be able to do that, because you just have so many haters on your back. I don't know how we explore it anymore. I really don't know. I'm quite glad to be my age in a way.
Age won't save you, Dawn. Dawn French, pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio.
Thanks for having me, Mariella.